What's up everybody, this is Cecil Alexander with Jazz Lesson Videos, and today we're going to be talking about how to develop blues language. When I was getting started with jazz guitar, I was coming from more of a blues guitar background, so I was used to players like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix and Buddy Guy. And once I got into jazz, I kind of thought that I had to abandon that vocabulary just because a lot of the sounds I was hearing were so much more complex than what I was used to hearing in blues. So what I'm here to tell you is that you can hold on to that great blues vocabulary and use it to get some really great idiomatic sounds over common jazz progressions. Today we're going to be talking about the use of auxiliary blues scale notes, tendency tones, as well as the vertical versus the horizontal approach in order to add more blues vocabulary into your jazz playing. All of the lines we're going to be taking a look at today are going to come from my latest resource with Jazz Lesson Videos, 60 Blues Phrases. This resource will come with the lines in all 12 keys as well as tab for guitar players and backing tracks and recordings of each of the lines as well. If you'd like to download the resource, you can find the link in the description below, and feel free to use the coupon code BLUES5 for an additional $5 off. So now let's get into our first concept, which is going to be that of the auxiliary blues scale notes. So most of you are probably used to using the minor blues scale or the minor pentatonic scale for soloing. Just as a quick recap, the minor pentatonic scale is going to be a 5-note scale. We start on C, that'll be C, E flat, F, G, and B flat. And then we add one note to it to create the minor blues scale. So there's going to be C, E flat, F, F sharp, G, and then B flat. So you can add some auxiliary notes to the blues scale to support different melodic motifs that you might want to add into your playing, including the ninth, which will be D natural, the major third, which is E natural, and the sixth. There are some other auxiliary blues scale notes that you can use, but those are probably going to be the most common. So really you end up with this really long scale. So you can use those notes in your phrases melodically, but what you want to do is not just run up and down the scale. You want to kind of break it up in different ways to create phrases. So now I'll play you a phrase that comes directly from the auxiliary blues scale notes section of my latest resource with Jazz Lesson Videos. This line is going to be over a major 2-5 in C major, and we're going to start off on our 2 minor 7 chord with a extended arpeggio. This is going to be using the F major 7 arpeggio over the D minor 7 with a little rhythmic variation. So on the A, C, and E, we're going to use an 8th note triplet to get up to that G. And you can consider that to be the 9th of the F major 7 or the 4th of D minor 7. So then we use kind of a little diatonic enclosure to get into the flat 3rd of D minor 7. Another diatonic approach, which is going to get us into E natural, which will be the 13th against that G7. And then I'm going to go down kind of a C major triad shape. So that could be like 3, 1, 5, chromatic approach into the flat 7th. And then I use a G major triad. So this will be D, B, into G, so that's the 5th, 3rd, and the root. And then I have kind of an idea that's going to utilize some of these auxiliary blues notes that you can think of within the minor blues scale or the major pentatonic scale. So our auxiliary note is going to be the major 3rd in relation to the minor pentatonic scale. So we go down kind of a minor pentatonic phrase, and then we have this 4th into the 3rd. That's going to be our resolution. And we have an appearance of another auxiliary tone that's going to be the 9th, which we're going to use to resolve into the root using a diatonic approach. So borrowing that B natural from the parent major scale, C major or C Ionian. So we resolve into the root, and then we again have the flat 3rd or the sharp 9 into that auxiliary note of the 3rd. So that's kind of a cool thing that you can think about with utilizing some minor pentatonic vocabulary, is that you can use the major 3rd just for kind of a little bit more character in your lines, as well as the natural 9. So you kind of end up with this sort of scale set. And you can kind of anchor on those notes in different ways melodically as you see fit. So the full phrase will sound like this slowly. So let's take a look at another phrase from the auxiliary blues notes section. So this phrase is going to be over a 3-6-2-5. So we're going to be in the key of C major. We have our 3-chord E minor 7. 6-7 is going to be A7, D minor 7 are 2, and G7 are 5. We're going to start by using a G major 7 arpeggio over our E minor 7 chord. So again, with some rhythmic variation like we did in that first phrase, where we're going to use the top 3 notes of that G major 7 arpeggio as part of an 8th note triplet. Then we have a chromatic approach into the root of E minor 7, then a chromatic enclosure into the 3rd of A7. We then go up a C sharp diminished 7th arpeggio. So against A7, that's going to give you the 3rd, 5th, flat 7, and the flat 9. We resolve to the root, and then we go chromatically until we get to F from there. So that'll be the flat 3rd of D minor 7. But at this point, I'm going to be thinking of the minor blues scale in relation to the key center, which is C. So I'm going to first enclose that auxiliary note of the major 3rd, and then I go down this idea that's kind of like a C major triad. 3rd root into the 5th, and then I have that blues scale passing note. And then I add in the major 3rd again as part of a chromatic approach into the flat 3rd, and then I just go down 1, 5 into 4. So those notes are, creating all sorts of different tensions against the 2 minor 7 and the 5-7, but again, I'm just kind of thinking of it in relation to the key center. So that line by itself would also work as a great line just over C7 or C major 7. So the full line will sound like this slowly. So hopefully with those 2 phrases, you can see how auxiliary blues scale notes can add a little bit more color to your blues playing. Next up, we're going to take a look at tendency tones. So tendency tones are going to be the notes within the blues scale, including those auxiliary blues scale notes that have sort of a specific weight to them. They kind of want to move in certain directions. You may be familiar with this concept from just the major scale, where we have the tendency tones of the 9th to the root, or the 4th to the 3rd, and the 6th to the 5th, or something like maybe the 7th up to the root. So within the minor pentatonic scale, we're going to have a couple different tendency tones. One is going to be that auxiliary blues scale note of the 6th down to the 5th. Another will be the sharp 9 up to the 3rd, and then another one is going to be the flat 5, which wants to usually move down to the 4th. You hear that sound a lot. So next up, we're going to take a look at a phrase that uses tendency tones over a static C major 7 chord. So this phrase is going to be over a C major 7. We're going to start on beat 2 with our major 7th. We are using a chromatic approach to get down to the 6th. Then another chromatic approach to get from the 6th to the 5th. We go down the major scale to the root, and then we're going to enter sort of the bluesy portion of the phrase. We have the 6th up to the sharp 9, which again is going to want to move up to the 3rd. So there's our first tendency tone there. Then we go back down to the root, and we have the 6th on the and of beat 4, which is going to want to move down to the 5th. Once we get to the 5th, we have this little rhythmic variation, this 8th note triplet in here to set up the 4th. And the 4th, this is going to be a major scale tendency tone, is going to want to move to the 3rd. We do so using a chromatic enclosure. Then we're going to sort of move down a scalar passage to the root, skip over the 7th, and we play the 6th, which again is a tendency tone that wants to resolve down to the 5th, and we do that one more time to end the phrase. So the full phrase put together slowly will sound like this. So here's another phrase from the book that's going to come from the tendency tones section. So our next phrase is going to be over a static C7 chord. We're going to start with this common bebop motif that's going to sound like this. So we play the flat 7th of C7 twice, then move down chromatically till we get to the 5th. Then we have a enclosure that's going to lead us into the 3rd. And we have our first appearance of a tendency tone here with that sharp 9 going up to the 3rd. That also happens to be part of that enclosure there. Then we have a fragment of a triad. We move down chromatically to the 4th, and you could see that other tendency tone of the flat 5th to the 4th. And then this next section, we're going to use this little 8th note triplet starting on the 4th. And then we have a chromatic approach that's going to lead us into the 3rd. We again have that tendency tone of the sharp 9 into that auxiliary note of the 3rd. We move up a C major triad from the 3rd. And then we again have that tendency tone of the sharp 9 to the 3rd. We move down root, 5th, 4th, which is our diatonic tendency tone, moving into the 3rd, up to the 5th, and then we finally finish the phrase by using another tendency tone of the 9th to the root. So the full phrase, when we put it together, will sound like this. So hopefully those two phrases allowed you to see how tendency tones can be used in context. Next up, we're going to take a look at the use of the vertical approach versus the horizontal approach in your blues playing. So the vertical approach is what we're typically used to with jazz playing, and this is going to mean playing a specific idea that aligns with the chord change. Some people could think of this as being a chord scale approach. You have your chord change and you have a chord scale that goes over it, or even having a chord change and having an arpeggio or melodic cell or a lick that works over that. The horizontal approach is going to be more familiar to blues-oriented players, and this just means if you have a tune that's in the key of C, you're going to play melodic ideas that are in that key center. So that could be blues scale-oriented ideas or major scale-oriented ideas, but today we're going to focus on the latter. And show how you can use some of those minor pentatonic scale ideas along with the auxiliary blues notes and the tendency tones from the past two sections to create some melodic phrases over chord progressions. So here's a line from this section of the book. So this line is going to be over a minor 2-5 in C minor. So we have D minor 7 flat 5, our 2 minor 7 flat 5 to G7. Our 5-7 into C minor 7 or 1. And we're going to start by highlighting the sound of that D minor 7 flat 5 by getting into that flat 5th from a half step below. We're then going to use kind of a broken up arpeggio. This will be like an A flat major 7. So we have A flat, C, and G. So we're just taking out the E flat that belongs to that 4-note arpeggio. We just have that 3-note shape. That's going to give us the flat 5, flat 7, and the 4th against the D minor 7 flat 5. We then kind of slip into more of a key center approach for just a moment by using the 5th of the key to anchor us into that C minor pentatonic sound. We then get down chromatically to the 4th, and we have kind of a rhythmic embellishment between the 4th and the flat 5. And then we resolve our line, so to speak, into the root. And then we're going to move back into more of a vertical approach on the G7 by treating this C as if it's the 4th. We resolve upwards to the 5th. And then we go down kind of a G Phrygian dominant fragment there, starting from the 5th. So 5, 4, 3, flat 9, root. And then we move down to resolve into the flat 3rd of C minor 7. And then we use, we kind of borrow a concept from one of the previous sections where we have this auxiliary note of the natural 6. And we kind of just play around with that sound. You could also think of that as being like an A diminished triad over the C. So that gives you 6, 1, and then flat 3. And then we finally just land on the root of the chord to resolve the line. So the full line will sound like this slowly. So here's how our last phrase is going to sound. So this last phrase is going to be over a static C minor 7. We're going to start on the root of our C minor 7, move up to the 4th, and then we have our flat 5, the blues scale note, so to speak, back down to the 4th, and then back down the scale till we get to the flat 7th. We use our auxiliary note of the natural 6, and we're going to use that to anchor us into more of a C Dorian sort of sound. So we're using, on strong beats, these notes, A flat, and G, and we get to those targets using sort of this kind of common bebop approach. We have these major thirds moving down chromatically. All right, so a major third between A and F, major third between A flat and E, and then finally our target of G. Then for 2 beats, we slip back into more of a horizontal approach and just kind of go down the blues scale with no auxiliary notes from the 5th. So 5, flat 5, 4, flat 3, root, then back into more of a vertical approach where we're outlining really this C Dorian sound pretty strongly. We have our 6, and then an A minor 7 flat 5 arpeggio, so you'll kind of hear that a lot in bebop vocabulary, and especially with this ending. So that's like the 9 to the root. Then we have a diatonic approach into the flat thirds, so that's 4, 2, into flat 3, and then we go up one of my favorite shapes to use to outline that C Dorian sort of sound. This is going to be a major 7 flat 5 arpeggio, so E flat major 7 flat 5, E flat, G, A, and D, and then we land on our 6 to get that nice minor 6 sound. So the full line will sound like this slowly. So hopefully those 6 phrases allowed you to see how you can use auxiliary blues scale notes, tendency tones, and the vertical and horizontal approach to add more interest to your blues scale playing. So if you feel like digging a little bit deeper into this topic, feel free to check out my latest resource with jazz lesson videos, 60 blues phrases, and again, feel free to use the coupon code BLUES5 for an additional $5 off. I'll see you next time.